actually have them right here on my shelf because I use them in class. But every moment holy for those people who don't know. I was thinking it's funny you said Rabbit Room has a publishing wing, to publish stuff that the big publishers wouldn't touch, and I'm thinking they probably would touch them now. Because as far as I can tell, they've sold really well.
Yeah, it's been surprising. When I wrote them, the first prayer that I wrote that ended up in volume one, I wrote for myself because it was something I needed. But then the idea almost immediately expanded, but it was into something that I thought, I think there's something here that will resonate with the Rabbit Room community, which was maybe, 6,000 people or so in terms of the, those who are engaging in some way with the Rabbit Room organization. I didn't know beyond that whether it would have resonance or not. So there's a sense in which I feel kind of detached from it because the response to it has been so out of proportion to anything that I know that I was capable of bringing to it, that there is this detachment that I make allusion to maybe in the introduction to volume 3, but I've so often just identified with that little kid in the Gospels who showed up to hear this preacher preach, with his, few little fishes and loaves that his mom had probably stuck in the basket for him for his lunch. And that kid, gives that little bit that he has, but then he watches as Christ blesses it and breaks it and multiplies it and distributes it, for the feeding of all these people. And I don't think the kid ever thought I did that.
Right.
So it's just this sometimes mystifying kind of thing when stories filter back of a couple days ago someone was telling me that they were speaking to someone that they know in Myanmar.
Wow.
Who was telling them about these every moment holy books that they use almost every day and how formational they've been. And there's I think more than anything my response is it's humbling, but there's also sometimes this little bit of a when you're driving on the interstate and you start to change lanes and then you hear a horn, someone laying on a horn, and you look and you see someone was in your blind spot and you jerk the wheel back over. And then for the next several miles, your heart's just beating really fast and all you can think about is what you might have caused there, how close you came. And so when I see what looks to me like that God has been pleased to multiply and use these prayers in these books in a way that's beyond anything I could even delude myself that I had contributed. What I do know is how easily I could have not written them. How over the years that I spent writing them, it was such a struggle and such a fight just to bring myself, day by day, even sometimes hour by hour, or, even in 5-minute increments, to bring myself back to it, to try again, to do this thing that even then I knew I couldn't make it what I wanted it to be, what my vision for it was. My ongoing prayer was that God would show up somewhere in the process, would meet me in the midst of my weakness, and would make the whole more than the sum of the parts that I could bring to it. But there were so many times when I could have so easily just given up, right? But, even that, I suppose, is a testament to the way that God, if we put various scriptures together, and we can see that God prepares good works in advance for us to do, and he prepares us for the doing of them, and then he is the one who brings them to completion.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and all we have to do is walk, right? Walk in those things.
Yeah, or just keep not saying no.
Yeah.
Right? That's how it feels to me sometimes. That.
Hey there, if you've benefited from this content at all, please hit the like and subscribe, or subscribe and like, one of those or both of them together on this video. It helps us tremendously with the math algorithm nerd monsters. Yeah. I feel like my life has been stumbling backwards into all kinds of opportunities where I could potentially create disasters for other people, which scares me. I think I can imagine what you said about Charlie Peacock is the way a lot of people feel about these books. Even my charismatic, non-denominational stepmother, who doesn't really have a liturgical bone in her body. I turned her on to these books, and she loves them. She reads every family gathering now. We're reading Every Moment Holy. She gives them to people as gifts. So I think it tapped into something that a lot of people hadn't experienced in their prayer life, which is that kind of raw, open psalmic, lament, the lament that ends with "Why God, why," rather than "But I trust in you, Lord" kind of moments. And I think Stanley Hauerwas has modeled. I don't know if you've seen his Prayers Plainly Spoken, but he's kind of modeled some of this. They're much shorter prayers, but they're just that kind of modeling that open prophetic, I don't know what you're doing, God, or help me in this moment. So I can very easily see why that kind of very honest, high integrity appeals to people. Also, I'm so glad to hear you say how terrified you are about the effects of all of this, because I've written a little bit on ritual, and I spent a few years kind of researching ritual in the Bible, like how the biblical authors thought about ritual and how they employ it. And then I wrote a popular book about ritual. And one of the things that, as I was kind of puzzling through, how do you deal with all the rituals that happen in churches, all the different ways churches do the same rituals, and once you start thinking about ritual, you can't stop seeing it everywhere, kind of a thing. But one of the things that struck me was how little attention people give to all the rituals that they're prescribing to people around each other. Even little things like a pastor saying, "Hey, can raise your hands while I pray," or just little things when we're asking people to do things with their bodies, which is anytime we're asking somebody to do something. There just seems to be no fear and trembling in the construction of the ritual. We just kind of go for it, and then, oops, that didn't work, or it turns, and then that ritual gets programmatized, and we can't change it because that's what the church has always done. And you're like, but it's a bad ritual, or it's flimsy, or it's vapid. And as Stanley Hauerwas also says, is it all starts with you pray some meaningless prayer, and then you're singing some sappy worship song, and the next thing you know, you killed your brother. And I put that quote on the front of my Old Testament syllabuses, and I always think like there's something really to that, where he's really actually trying to draw us back to the fear and trembling we should bring to those little rituals we're prescribing. So I wonder, having said all of that, if there's any part of Every Moment Holy where you're like, ooh, I don't know if I should have told people to pray that. Not asking for any juicy tidbits. I'm just wondering if there's anything that gave you pause when you were writing it, or in looking back.
Well, the first things that come to mind are just maybe more anecdotal. One is that in volume one of the earlier prayers that I wrote, as I was kind of still experimenting with the form, trying to find it, I, at a certain point, included the instruction in the middle of the prayer that I can't remember how I described it, but the petitioner may now, strike themselves lightly on the.
I remember
chest.
this one. Yeah.
And it might have only made it through the first couple printings before the publisher and I were like, let's just get rid of that.
Really? So now we know if we have a first press edition or not.
Right.
Okay.
Self-flagellation.
And then
also in the first edition, in the final prayer, which is a liturgy of praise to Christ, the King of Creation, or a liturgy of praise to the King of Creation. Between the first and the second printings, I made a significant edit on the refrain. Originally, it said, and that prayer, for people who aren't familiar with it, is kind of this poetic praise of, it's unpacking what it means that Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Right? It's like, yes, he is that, but that also gets worked out in the particulars.
right.
He is. So it becomes sort of this wild romp of celebratory praise, looking at all of creation. That, that he's not just the God of everything. That means he's specifically the God of, the things on the quantum level and things on the, on the planetary and universal level, and of, not just all of the animals in general, but of each kind of animal in particular as well, that kingship and lordship gets worked out in the details.
Very Colossians 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the way I had phrased it in the first edition was, our names for you have been too few. And I think that works fine for something that's a poem.
Mm.
But for something that's actually liturgy, there's a different criteria. There's a more stringent criteria, because you don't want to be asking people to be praying something corporately together, to be giving voice to it, but to have to be trying to do the work of connecting the dots between these abstractions. There's more of a responsibility there. And so, there was a pastor that I was an acquaintance of, who made the point that that we don't have the right to name God, right? That he defines himself, he names himself. And I could have made that argument that, well, I don't mean that,
right.
We're coming up
Bob
with the names
or
of God.
Clarissa.
What we're doing is unpacking
Right.
the implications of the names God has given himself. But it was a caution that deserved some consideration. And so after doing so, because of the nature of what I think liturgy should do, as opposed to something that's just poetry, even though liturgy can be beautiful and poetic, it serves a different purpose from something that's just purely poetry. So I changed it to, our thoughts of you have been too small, too few. So from the second printing onward, it's been that refrain.
We're getting the secret, the collector's editions now.
Yeah.
You're going to find these first prints on eBay soon, and somebody negotiating, they're trading a fireplace for a first edition.
Right.
Yeah, just to give the viewers and hearers a taste, I actually picked up volume 2 first. That's how I came into it. And this is on Death, Dying, Grief. I think it's
Death, Grief, and Hope.
Yeah. Sorry, we should put hope. But when good news is bad, for seasons of uncertainty, before medical treatment, intercession for one who is slowly losing bodily functions, or function, I should say here, to the caregivers for the rest, on dying well, There's a whole host there. And I think when you read these prayers, I didn't need to hear you say what you just said to figure out that there was great care taken in the wording and the phrasing and the length and the pace of these prayers. I think they, it's like I don't know if you'll take this as an insult or not.
I'll
It's
try.
like modern hymn writers, right? I mean, there's something like about the particulars, there that mix of particular and universal that happens here that becomes almost sacramental in some moment. And I mean that as somebody who hates the word sacramental. So for all kinds of weird pedantic reasons. But it does become oddly sacramental. So I know on behalf of thousands and thousands of people, are greatly appreciative that you did muscle through 5 minutes at a time, an hour at a time, and a day at a time to get these written down. What else from the Rabbit Room would you commend to people, your work or others?
Well, I would encourage people to go to rabbitroom.com, and then you can click on the bookstore option to see all of the different books that Rabbit Room publishes, and there are dozens of those now. There's fiction and nonfiction, but there are also the books that Rabbit Room Press curates, right? That they think if you appreciate what Rabbit Room publishes, then these are also books by other authors we think you might be interested in. So they've always had a very generous kind of stance in that regard. And Andrew Peterson is remarkable in that respect, his generosity to other artists and how he's constantly elevating other people on the stage or, in the various media conversations he has, that he's always, trying to open the door wider for his friends.
That's nice.
And that philosophy has definitely carried through the organization in many different ways. As to specific recommendations, I mean, it depends so much. They have such a wide variety of books now. It would depend so much on what someone likes. They no longer publish Andrew's Wingfeather Saga fantasy series. That is, all 4 of those books plus a collection of short stories are published by Waterbrook Press now. But they still sell them, and those for families, I mean, those are just tremendous read alouds, and well loved. They've sold over 1 million copies of those now.
Holy cow! I've never even heard of them.
Yeah, and they're actually in production on season 3 of what is expected to be a 7-season animated series. So seasons 1 and 2 of those books are available to stream now. So